Hello, and welcome to part 2 of Creating Communities of Belonging Through a Racial Justice Lens. I'm Naya Blair Hackworth. I use she and her pronouns, and I am one of the directors of inclusion in the NCAA Office of Inclusion. Today's program is an extension of yesterday's event, where we heard from 5 talented student athletes who discussed their experiences and thoughts on racial justice and what they would like to see from coaches, athletic administrators, and staff, and the NCAA when it comes to creating and fostering racial just environments. Those student athletes are a few of the many student athletes who are making their voices heard, who are creating change, and who are challenging us as an athletic community to really examine who we are and what we do. It is no secret that we're dealing with a lot when it comes to the pandemic. And it is also no secret that we can no longer be oblivious or ignore the injustices that Black people face, not only in our communities, but also in our workplaces and within sports. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. stated, "There comes a time when silence is betrayal." And I will say, the time is now. Today's program, which features 2 phenomenal individuals, will deepen the conversation of what it means for us individually and collectively to work together to create practices, policies, and environments that are anti-racist, that change systems in our culture. So without further ado, I will turn it over to our 2 featured speakers, Jen Fry and Victoria Ferris. So Jen and Victoria.
Thank you for that great introduction. Welcome, friends, to talk about leading through an anti-racist lens. We are so excited to spend this hour with you and answer your questions. So if you have questions, throw them all in the Q&A so we can get started on that as soon as possible. So I'm Jen Fry. I run Jen Fry Talks. Jen Fry Talks is a social justice firm that focuses on educating and empowering those within athletics through an anti-racist lens. We need to stop talking about not being a racist and say we're going to start working on being anti-racist and pushing policies, procedure, and change so that we can start making organizations, institutions equitable.
Great, thanks. And I'm Victoria Ferris. I identify as a queer white woman and I use she, her pronouns. And I run Ferris Consulting, which is a consulting firm that does similar work to Jen's, but my research focuses on the role that white folks can play in disrupting systems of oppression and specifically racism. So I spent my doctoral research talking to folks of color who worked in higher education about their experiences with racism in the workplace and beyond the workplace, and what they wish those of us with white privilege would do to disrupt it. And so I kind of come from that lens to this work, and just really excited to be here and get to be here with Jen. So thank you. And we're excited to see your questions too. So thanks in advance for participating with us.
Okay, friends. So one of the main things that we always like doing, if you've watched our webinars or heard us speak, is that we always like to ground in definitions, because we have to remember that we are coming from a bunch of different lenses. And it's just like in sports, there are certain words that if you say this, you know what it is. I come from a volleyball background. So if I say, what type of offense do you run, a 5-1 or a 6-2, you're going to know that. But when we talk about race or racism, people have all different ideas of what this verbiage definitions are. So the first one we're going to talk about is we're going to say that when we talk about race, we're talking about something that's socially constructed, literally something man-made. It is just looking at skin color, texture of your hair, bone texture, the bridge of your nose, those type of things. Race is completely socially constructed. There is nothing in biology. You can take one of those DNA tests or paternity tests, and all it will show is where you're from. It will not show that you are Black or white. So we have to remember that this is something completely socially constructed. The next thing is when we talk about racism. Racism is a system in which one race maintains supremacy over another through a set of attitudes, behaviors, social structures, and most importantly, institutional power. We need to stop looking at racism as a person and start looking at it as a system. Because if we look at it as a system, then we can start changing things within that system. But if we consistently look at it as a person, then it's easy to say, well, I'm a good person, I would never do that. Oh, I know them, they're great, they would never do something like that. They didn't have the intent. There was no intent behind that. You're just reading it wrong. And so we need to look at this as something as a system, and we are all in this system. This system is 400 years old. So it's not going to be changed overnight or even while we're still alive. but we have to start acknowledging the system and our involvement in it.
And to that end, whiteness is the academic term used to capture the all-encompassing dimensions of white privilege, dominance, and assumed superiority in society. These dimensions include ideological, institutional, social, cultural, historical, political, and interpersonal. Whiteness is like the air that we're breathing. Whiteness is what allows us to see race as only meaning people of color and not white. It is the way that we make like white the norm. So when we think about policies, or we think about professionalism, or we think about culture, that it's all rooted in whiteness. And for most of us, we don't even see that because it's so ingrained in the systems. And then we have anti-racism, which is the active process of identifying and eliminating racism by changing systems, organizational structures, policies, practices, and attitudes so that power is redistributed and shared equitably. And the key words here is active, right? Anti-racism is an active process. I often say, if you've heard me speak, there is no neutrality in oppression. There's no neutrality. So even though I spent many years sitting quietly in rooms where I watched oppression happen and I thought like, it wasn't me, I didn't do it, so I'm okay, I now realize that I was an active participant, because anything that isn't active disruption is active participation in the system. There's no neutrality in this. And it includes disrupting policies and structures, kind of to what Jen said, that, you know, racism is structural, and attitudes, because it's also interpersonal. So with that, we're going to jump into a couple of questions. Jen, I'd love to start with a question that I have for you that we've been hearing often. As we know, there's often only one or a small handful of people of color in an organization or an office in leadership roles. And I'm wondering, what can those folks be doing right now? And what are the best what's your best advice for how to navigate?
So with those people who have more than likely been beating the drum and talking about the whole time that you've been in there, you need to ask for more money and a title. And I am dead serious on this. You have been talking about this stuff probably your entire time in there. You have been the only person in the room that has consistently been saying something. You're the only person in the room that people have come to. Hey, we're not sure about what to do with this Black athlete. Can they come talk to you? We're going to need some D&I work. Can you do that? Can you be on this committee? Can you? And so now it's time for you to take care of yourself. Put the onus on those white people who are around you, who say that they're allies, that they say that they're willing to do the work. Ask for more money and ask for a title change. Because in reality, in this time, there really isn't anything you can do. You have been trying to do this stuff on and on and on. It's really time for the white people around you to say, we are going to now take this stuff that you have been talking about, the programs and policies that you have been telling us we need to implement. You know, we are going to take your advice and we are going to start doing that. Because in reality, no, you have so much on your shoulders already. Because like I keep saying, you have been talking about this. So it's time to say, I am done talking. Tell me where my new office is with a window. And you are going to start doing that work. Because it can't be just that one Black person. It needs to be the white people that surround them. So now I'm going to throw it back to you. Really, Victoria, what can white people, especially white administrators, white people in those leading roles, what can they do in this situation?
Great. I think first and foremost, hear what Jen just said. If you're in a position where you have access to a budget and any supervisory capacity, you need to have a hard look at where the labor is in your org and where the finances and resources are, because often there's not alignment. And so research shows us that there's probably already some inequities in pay where folks aren't being compensated the same. And even if they already are, the labor isn't the same, because when you're the one person of color or one of few, you know, the example Jen just gave of how often we reach out to a colleague to say, can you talk to this Black student athlete because you can relate to their experience? Could you even imagine what would happen if your Black colleague called, if Jen called me and said, I have this white girl athlete and I don't know what to do with her, can you talk to her?
I would be on my stuff, my box of stuff would be out on the street before I even finished the comment.
Listen.
Like I would be like, can you talk to this white girl? And then like my email wouldn't work anymore. My phone would be disconnected. It would not happen.
Yeah, never. It would never happen. And so for white people, we have to like really have a hard look in the mirror and accept that the work and the labor is not equitable. It's not equitable. And we need to own that and then compensate and align that accordingly and stop pretending that it is, because we are absolutely burdening and burning out our colleagues of color, reviewing statements, translating documents, shouldering emotional labor for students, being our confidant when we've made a mistake to be like, I just bumbled this thing, you know, and then there's Jen making me feel better about it. We need to compensate. So hear that call. And if you have any, you know, power when it comes to how budgets are and resources are put, like fix it. Promote your people, pay your people, give them the titles that actually reflect the work that they're doing. That's number one. But also, we have to recognize that the consequences are different. Allyship has consequences. Allyship has consequences. If you're a white person and you're sitting here and you feel like you're an ally and you've never taken a consequence for what you've done, you're not an ally. If you feel comfortable at work most of the time and you feel like you're an ally, you're not an ally. Because allying and being an accomplice requires us to get deeply uncomfortable. It requires us to wrestle with our own beliefs and thought patterns and practices. It requires us to leverage. We use the word leverage our privilege for a reason, because it means there are consequences. It means that sometimes people don't like me. I often joke about how I don't get invited to happy hour because someone will say like, hey, we're all gonna go get margaritas at such and such place. And I'm like, you know, that place really appropriates Mexican culture and it's owned by white people. And I think we should go to this place instead. And so I stopped getting invited. And those are sometimes the consequences. And I'm not trying to pat myself on the back for not being invited to happy hour, but I'm saying that that's what it looks like sometimes, is like the constant engagement and recognizing that there are consequences. And for white folks, a lot of times the consequences come in the form of social capital. Because if we are often in spaces with only other white people and we're not naming racism and trying to lead with an anti-racist lens in those all white spaces, we're not, again, there's no neutrality. We're not actively anti-racist and we're upholding the systems. And when we are doing it, we make other white people uncomfortable, and there are consequences that come with that. And so my best advice is to reallocate your funds, promote and pay your folks who are doing good, hard labor and who are disproportionately taking on the work. And then start to figure out where you're going to get uncomfortable and what consequences you're going to leverage to be able to start influencing change. And the idea that everybody around you is racist and you are not is also probably not true. And so as much as we can also hold up the mirrors to ourselves, I think is also really necessary.
Okay, we're getting some amazing questions in both the chat, the Q&A. What question you got for me first, Victoria?
There was a great one here about recommendations. What recommendations do you have for getting Black student athletes, coaches, and admin into more leadership roles without making them feel like they're, quote, filling a role? And so I like the idea about how do we do this without tokenizing?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great comment. I think the first thing is just have that conversation that we want to put you in a role because we see these things. Because the problem that could be is, well, we want to put you in this leadership role. Well, why? I'm not captain on my team. Well, we just think you'd be a good fit, AKA we need other Black face. And you have to name, like, this is why we think you'd be very critical for this role. But then also you need to make sure that when they have that role, they have the power that goes with that role. Because what we'll tend to see is that you'll put a Black face in some type of leadership role and they have zero power. What they're doing is that they're trying to make change, they're trying to do something, and they keep getting pushed down. We don't think that's a good idea. Maybe, I don't know if you're prepared for that. And so you have to ask yourself, if you are going to put people in leadership roles, are you going to give them the power that comes with it? The power to push the envelope, the power to create change, the budget that goes with it. If you're giving people these DEI titles, are you giving them the budget that goes with that? Because what we're seeing is like, okay, ding, you're the DEI person. Okay, great. I'd love to do this, this, and this. I'll need about 15,000. We don't have the budget for it yet. Maybe we'll give you like 1,000. And so that right there shows that you're tokenizing them. If you're not willing to put your money and your time, then don't do it. And they will see right through you, especially now. They will see right through you. So if you're going to do that, have a conversation about it, money towards it, but also say you are going to be the start, because we plan on doing this with all these other openings. We're going to make sure we have a diverse candidate pool. We're doing this, this, and this. Because if they ask you that and you're like, well, we're just giving you the leadership role for now, and then we're going to figure out the other stuff, they're going to see it. Don't do it. Do not do it. You're going to give it to them. You're going to explain why. You're going to put money towards it. And then you're going to talk about also how you plan to do it with others, either leadership roles coming open or jobs that are coming open. This is always my favorite question to ask you, because I love the stories. Essentially, what are some strategies that student athletes or anybody can do to navigate these current events, Black Lives Matter, race, or anything at the dinner table? Victoria, what can these people do to have positive outcomes from the conversation?
This is a good question. And I want to name specifically the advice that I'm giving about this question is for like white people talking to other white people. I have no business dictating how folks of color should try to talk about this in any way. So, but for me, when I'm with my family, which is almost entirely white, or even my friend groups or other spaces, I try to relate in as often as possible. And so, when somebody comes to me and they're like, I know you think this, but I think this, and you're wrong. Like, I have never once had my mind changed because somebody told me I was wrong. Also, I'm a Leo, so I'm like, get out of here with that. But it happens like this, right? But instead, I think a lot of times we're closer than we realize. And it's when we pause and say like, well, help me understand. Well, I've had great conversations. I talked recently on one of our webinars about my uncle who's a cop, and I said to him, like, okay, if you follow me on social media also, like, I'm like out here beating the drum of like, defund the police. The police have no business in schools. Like, I think that we need drastic change with policing. And so my opinions on that aren't a secret to my family, to anyone who follows me online, right? And like, I know my uncle is somebody I have great respect for. And he was a cop in the NYPD for 25 years before he retired. And he had just retired shortly before Michael Brown was murdered in Ferguson. And so my family was out having this like debate, and honestly, I'm not even going to repeat it because it's harmful and offensive. Some of the stuff they were saying, it was enraging and humiliating. Like, it was gross. But so it took a minute because number one, I knew if I was like, you're all disgusting and racist, it would shut down the conversation, but it also wouldn't bring any like change. So I paused and I took a deep breath and I was like, listen, Uncle John, you know that I respect you. You know how much I respect the work that you did and like the ways like he was shot at. And I know you took a lot of risks to do your work, but talk to me. Like, I can't believe for a minute that you think that this is the way it should be. And then everybody else got quiet and listened, right? And what happened is that ultimately he was like 100%. There's no reason that man should have been shot. There's no reason that his body should have been left in the street. This is disgusting. They should be accountable. Those cops should be off the street. Like, no cop should be on the street like this. And he said to me, it's easy for you to sit where you are and talk about policing when you've never been in this position, in the shoes of a cop. And he was right about that, right? And so even though there were parts where like, have I changed my mind about like the structure of policing? No, I haven't. But do I have a deeper appreciation for the individual police officers? I absolutely do. And so I think finding ways to connect to people to find out like, what is the shared belief that we have here, or the shared fear? Often like racism is fueled by a fear. I've talked to some of my white, like older, like uncles and stuff who are like, everyone's taking our jobs and we don't have anything anymore. And now it feels like oppression against white men. And part of me just wants to like laugh, but part of me is like, I see that. I see how when everything has been one way and now it's shifting, that's really hard. And so instead of me being like, well, now you know what it's like to be, right, just being able to say like, yeah, that's really hard and things are changing. And what are some of the benefits that come with the change? And like, how do you think you can navigate the change? And so my best advice is to try to relate and connect to people in the whatever ways you can, and then further the conversation and get it deeper. I was going to ask you, what are action steps that athletic departments need to take to educate their departments besides programs?
Well, here's the thing is that, let's name it, the programs are usually for the student athletes. Like the programs aren't for everybody. You ain't seeing the AD in there like this, like, let's go. You know, so like we have to name who the programs are for. And that is the number one thing, is who is doing the learning, who is being held accountable for the learning. You know, I went and did a workshop at Colgate, and I love me some Dr. Nikki Moore, and she couldn't be at the meeting, but you know what she did? She FaceTimed in, and she was like, Jen, I can't be there, but here's my phone. You know, so we literally were passing her face around. Okay, partner, who has the phone with Dr. Moore? And they're literally sitting there talking. Like, that is showing I can't be here, but I'm going to make sure I'm still learning. And that's what I don't see from athletic directors. They will come in and be like, hi, this is Jen Price. She's great. And then leave. And guess what everyone else says? That this is not something that's important to the university, to our athletic department. So we just push away the programming for athletes and say we have to have a deep focus on our administration and our coaches, like a deep focus. The administration should be doing 90% of the work. The athletic director should be there doing 90% of the work. He should be showing, she should be showing, they should be showing, this is how you do the work. Then it's holding all of their senior staff accountable for doing the work. Then the programming for coaches. Coaches should not be allowed to not be there. I've been at numerous Power 5 schools, and the football and basketball staffs are nowhere to be found. The staffs that are coaching 90% of the people of color are nowhere to be found during diversity and inclusion work. That is completely unacceptable. And if athletic directors and presidents are allowing that to happen because of the amount of the money that those coaches make, they need to rethink that, because that is unacceptable. That the people who have the most Black and brown bodies are the ones that are never to be found. So if that AD wants to make changes, they need to say that I expect your whole football staff from top to bottom to be there. I expect your whole basketball staff from top to bottom to be there, to be in the front row, to be asking the questions. Because if those people that are teaching and coaching the most Black and bodies are not there, then none of your programming matters. Point blank. So you need to rethink, what do we hold, what accountable measures do we hold for our coachings or for our coaches? Because in reality, what they expect of their athletes are to be there, to be paying attention, to be off their cell phones. Those are the 3 things that they expect from their athletes. And we don't see that from the coaches. I've had sessions where the coaches are literally in the back like this. They are not paying attention. So I'm trying to pull things from these white athletes to get them to understand. They look back, and their whole football coaching staff, the 1 or 2 people that are there, they're not even paying attention. So I'm not even worried about programs until we can start developing the education for the administration, coaches, staff, and then it will trickle to the athletes. But until those people don't say that this is critically important, that we start to understand these things, the programming does not matter, because it's only going to be for athletes. And then they're going to walk away and say, well, my coach wasn't there. Because I get athletes will be like, hey, was my coaches in the coaching session? Nope. And so they know that if you're not there, they're thinking, well, why should we care about it? So it needs to stop from the top, and that they are explicitly saying we are going to do all of this work before we even think about getting it to our athletes.
And like, you cannot say that equity, inclusion, diversity, pick your lingo, is a part of your mission or a part of your values or a core part of your organization or anything even remotely important if there are not dollars and time tied to it. Because we all know that the quickest way to know a person's values is where they spend their money and how they spend their time. And so anything that you're doing that's short of that is surface, it's performative, it's not real, it's not meaningful, and you are going to be called out. Like, I think if I could have one message to white leadership, it is that the playbook is changing. And for 25 years, we've been playing it safe to keep white people happy. And so we send a statement and we have a committee and we do some listening sessions, and maybe we add a tutoring program or a leadership program, but then those students graduate and new students come in, so we don't really have to do much. And we've kept our donor base happy and our alumni happy. The game has changed. And if you haven't seen yet that the game has changed, you're not following the right voices on social media and on Twitter, your student athletes see the power of their voices in a way that I think few have before. Students in general see the power of their voices, and they are unifying. Everyone's at home right now. They are unifying those voices.
Nothing but time, Victoria.
Listen, and they are coming together, and they're like, oh, equity matters to you in this Black Lives Matter statement, but look, here's a picture of the leadership. Follow it. They're taking down companies, they're taking down universities, and the playbook has changed. And so if you're not changing your strategy and seeing what's happening, it's going to be too late. It's going to swallow you up. We got to put your money, put your resources, put your commitments where your mouth is. And it is, Jen said this yesterday to me, this is a student athlete welfare issue. This is not like it's a cool thing politically. I've had white people recently say like, well, now that it's hip to be an ally, and I like rage, this is a human welfare issue. And for those of you who listened in yesterday, one of the student athletes on that panel, I'm sorry, I don't know his name, but talked about how, I think he said his uncle or a family member reached out and said, you better be careful for how you're raising your voice and using your platform, because the Klan is starting their meetings again and you don't want to become a target. These students, people in general, people of color, Black people in America right now are putting literally everything, their lives on the line to fight for their own liberation and justice, while we're just talking about reading a book next month and like listening and learning. Like, there has to be urgency in this.
Ooh, child, yes. Okay. So I'm gonna ask you, so Victoria, you are an ally, just, y'all have seen that meme of like Martha Stewart and Snoop Dogg, and it's like only one person here has been arrested, guess who? And it ain't Jen Fry. I'm just gonna say, I'm not gonna call out names, but Jen Fry has not been arrested for civil disobedience. Take what you want from that. So you are doing the work on the front lines. You're doing all this amazing co-conspirator work. You are there. So what do you think about if they want to designate you the diversity and inclusion person? Like, what do you think? Because we have a lot of questions about that. About, is it appropriate for an athletic department to designate a white person as a D&I designee? What do you think about that?
Whew, you're going right to the core of all of it, huh, Jen? Here's the thing. This is probably the thing I think about the most of anything. I mean, like, really, I think about this all the time. And I am often reminded that there's no one right way to have an anti-racist society, and there's no one right way to dismantle racism. If there were, we'd have done it by now, right? We've had Angela Davis and Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. and Tamika Mallory today, and right, like everyone, there's so many civil rights leaders who have different approaches, and there's a reason for that, because for real change to happen, I think it has to be tackled in a ton of different ways. So I think the real question you need to ask yourself is why? Why as an organization do you want to bring a white person in to do this work? Or why as an individual do you think it's your work to do? Because oftentimes for white people, the why is rooted in white supremacy, especially if we haven't done a lot of our own work. So if I ever show up to this work because I want to help, or because like I think I'm really smart and I can say something that Jen can't say, or like that, because I know it better, all of that is like just white supremacy that's creeping up in my body because I am a white person in America, and it's hard to have it not creep up in my body. But if you know that you are showing up because the folks of color in the department have said, I'm not touching that job, you go do it because it's so political and somebody's probably not going to make it. You know how often CDOs get fired? You know how often, people of color lose their jobs when they're doing diversity and equity work? And they're often wildly underpaid and undercompensated. And so if you know that you're going in because you need to be the bulldozer that makes the space to then bring in the person behind you when the space has been cleared and the politics have been neutralized and the budgets have been found, like, great. but I think it's a time, place, manner thing. And I think context matters. And I think why you want it matters. And like the real hard question that no one really likes is it because it's just more comfortable for you? Because the truth is that like, I can say things to white people that they don't like, but they can hear, that if Jen says, Jen doesn't get asked back. And so sometimes our desire as a white person is to bring in somebody who feels more comfortable or more palatable, or like somebody who fits a little bit more with my style. And like, I hear all of that, and it is deeply rooted in white supremacy, the thought that I should be comfortable, or that any like what a person's message is changes based on their tone or how they look or how they deliver it. And so I think we have to have real honest conversations, because also white people can hire a person of color into that role strictly to have that person uphold the same values and systems. So if your goal is to hire someone because they make you comfortable, that's probably not the person you should hire for the job, because that job requires discomfort. And leading requires discomfort. Put your money where your mouth is. Like, you don't get to disrupt something in a meeting and then go home and sit with your family and like not disrupt, or go like golfing on the weekends. And like, I mean, you have to do it all in, because people see and notice. And I'm not saying you have to go get arrested, although if you want to, you call me, I'll give you all the places to go and how to do it. But we have to leverage what we have. And so for me, sometimes that's my body at a protest, like literally putting my body on the line. Sometimes it's my resources. We know that white people are disproportionately paid. White men particularly make far more money than everyone else. Redistribute your resources, invest them where you say that it matters to you. Invest your time. Stop going to the golf course that you know discriminates against people of color or people in the queer community, and tell them why. Don't just stop your membership. Tell them, I'm not coming back because of this. You know, I gave up all the clothing companies that have sent me pride, rainbow stuff, and didn't send me a Black Lives Matter message. I'm just not willing to put my money in places that only want rainbows and not actual liberation. Like, we can take consequences.
Awesome. Okay, what you got for me? There's a lot. There's a lot of good stuff. Yes.
Jen, there's good questions in here. I've seen a few about like, I've had job openings, but people of color don't want to apply, or I'm having a hard time recruiting, people of color into the positions that I have opening. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I do. And also I just want to hit on what people asked about money as funding. Hit up NCAA, they got money. Also look for different parts on campus for money. Who can you partner with that can get more money to your diversity person? Also see, can you say, hey, we'll give you more vacation days. We'll give you a free parking spot if that's something that they have to pay for. Look and see, ask some of your sponsors to see if you can get them stuff. There's ways, not just money if you don't have it, but there's other ways that you can make sure that they feel supported. So I'd say the first thing is you have to make your department inclusive before you hire diversity. Diversity is not your inclusiveness. And that's what we tend to see, is that, well, we're all white, we're gonna bring in some people of color, and it's gonna be a really, really traumatic space for them, and they're gonna walk away. And so you have to start working on your department and fixing that so that when people of color come in, they feel more comfortable. Because, I think one of the ones that I saw was like, the position, it doesn't pay well, stuff like that. Who in athletics pay well? Let's just throw that out there. And so I think we have an understanding, I hate to say it, that a lot of them don't pay well, and that's not the reason. Here it is, low salary, mission fit. Many D3s pay low, but everyone's still going to work there. So I don't think that those are acceptable reasons. The mission fit, well, what is your mission saying? Then maybe you need to restructure the mission before you do the hiring. So I think that we need to start paying attention to what the problems are, and not just saying, well, these don't attract people of color. Well, if your mission is rooted in white supremacy, if you have a low salary, but the people of color who do come work make even less, well, it's an understanding. Like, I get it. So you have to start working on those things. Say, hey, how can we start making our department that's all white more inclusive, so that we're not tokenizing them? What do we need to do to make sure that they are paid appropriately? What can we do so that we can start changing this mission statement? What can we do to start changing these things? And then when you have applicants, say, okay, this pool is all white. Where do we need to start sending these links to get more people of color? And when we interview them, we can talk about we are making our office more inclusive through these measures. We are working on our mission statement because we see it's rooted in white supremacy. These are the things that we're working on, so that when you come here, know that we're not going to be perfect. We actively know these things and we want to work to change them. That's how you start getting that. Because look, in athletics, everyone's working for a low wage. That's just not acceptable to use that as a reason why.
And your reputation precede you. Like if you think, again, if you think people aren't having side talk about what was it like to work in that place and why did I leave and this and that, like if you are really having that much trouble recruiting, the question you need to also be asking is like, what does that say about us? Not what does it say about them? Because what Jen just listed, those are all easy answers. She just, like crossed all of them off the list. That's just easy blame and deflection. But what is it happening in your organization that makes people not want to work there?
Yeah, exactly. Let me see here. Okay, I have one question for you. But I have a question A and a question B. Great. So question A, I think we're going to both kind of eat alive. It says, can you speak on when you're not good enough for the title, but you get the work?
Yeah. Listen, this is a thing that only happens to women and people of color and people with other marginalized identities, trans, non-binary folk, right? No white man, very few white men get asked to do the work of a job that they don't get compensated and entitled for. So real talk, again, if you're listening and you have any authority over the structure of your department, you need to get real honest with yourself about who you're asking to do unpaid labor. Because I will guarantee that you are probably not asking the people who look like you to do it.
And whoever sent this in, I need you to send this webinar to your boss. Just, hey, take a look at this link. Please do it. Because the reality is you are good enough for the title if you're good enough for the work.
Yep.
I mean, that's the reality.
Let's be honest, how many people get the title when they're not good enough for the work, but they get the title because for whatever reason? We all seen people get promoted.
That shoulder tap.
Yeah, exactly. So no, and listen, it's not an easy thing to say no to because there is a power dynamic at play where you think like, if I don't say yes, I'm going to lose my job. And the reality is you may have a little bit more agency than you realize, again, particularly in this moment, if you're a person with a marginalized or underrepresented identity, but document all of that stuff and be really mindful about the consequences that may come with you saying no or pushing back on it. But there are ways to sit down and say, like, here's all that I'm doing. And this is what my job says. So what are we going to shuffle around on my plate?
Yes. I mean, that, like, and then also the idea that, like, I have to find it. It's like this idea of like, I'm not good enough for the title. This ain't about you. This is about them. I need you to throw that word out. I'm not good. If you don't stop saying that you ain't good enough for the title, that's some shit right there. Like, quit saying that.
And if your title requires like a year's, like some jobs have these like arbitrary rules. Number one, those rules get broken for white guys all the time. Number two, those rules are to maintain the status quo. If you are excellent, you're excellent. If you're good enough to do the work, you're good enough to get the title. I don't care what the job description says. And guess what? Job descriptions get changed all the damn time. You got one, Jen.
Look, that's why I was like, let me come at you with this, because that one got my afro big. I was like, hey, what, you ain't good enough for that title? I mean, if you don't stop with that shit, what? I'm sorry, in civil, like, that one got me hot and spicy. Like, yes, you are good enough. Don't let them people tell you you're not. Man.
What was had A and B?
Whew, let me breathe. I'm in Arizona and it's 130 outside. You making me even hotter with that. Okay. How do we provide a space of belonging to our Indigenous and Latinx students when the conversation conversation mainly centers on examples with Black students?
That was the question I had highlighted too. I'm glad you asked this one. Okay. I think that there's a few factors at play here. Number one is part of the white identity development process is going through the stage of seeing race as a Black-white binary, that there are Black people and there are white people, and we talk about race in that binary. And so I think sometimes the conversation centers around Black and white, because we're not far enough along in our work to recognize the nuance that comes with race and racism. And I think in this moment, Black people are being centered because the marginalization and the oppression and the subjugation is so profound on Black communities that I think many would argue that the most harm is happening to Black people in America right now. And so, not that other groups aren't also being marginalized, but there's a focus right now on the kind of intense, disproportionate harm and violence that's happening in to the Black community by this country. And so I think that there's an important need to center anti-Black violence and anti-Black racism in this moment, because the genocide to Black people that's happening at the hands of the state is exactly that. I said what I said. It is genocide. It is state sanctioned. My tax dollars are supporting this violence, and we need to do something about it. And we need to hold space to recognize that it is not the only violence that is happening. It is not the only state-sanctioned violence that is happening. It is not the only state-sanctioned genocide that is happening. When we think about Indigenous students and Indigenous communities, there has also been genocide from the beginning of time. And so I think we have to build our capacity and our knowledge to recognize and appreciate the myriad ways that communities are discriminated against in our offices, on our campuses, on the field, on the court, in our community, in our country, globally. Like, we need to see it on all those levels and recognize that all communities of color are facing marginalization, and it's different depending on the community. And so I think that this is really a twofold part, is like, how do we keep centered Black Lives Matter and anti-Black violence, which, other people of color can absolutely be the perpetrators of violence against Black people. We saw that in the George Floyd case. One of the police officers that actually protected the cop who was murdering him was a man of color, right? And so there's room for anti-Blackness within any community that we need to really grapple with and disrupt. And we need to recognize the way that other communities, particularly Latinx and Indigenous communities, are being harmed by the same systems. And so to me, the answer to this question is about capacity building for white folks. Is that we have to be able to see beyond a binary, that it's just Black and white, and we have to be able to hold multiple truths at the same time. We can center anti-Black racism and not lose sight of all the other forms of racism.
Yeah, I agree with that. And we have to understand also that this country is built on the Black-white binary, and everything falls into it. And then if you want to look up something really interesting, look up the model minority myth, because that kind of shows how the different ethnicity and races are being pitted against each other. And so really diving deep into understanding that, because then we see, with this Black-white binary, that we can start, if we can fix that binary, everything else inside is going to be fixed. But we need to start with that, because then we can start tackling more and more of the genocide against Native American people, because they're being arrested at crazy high rates as well. If we look what's going on the reservations, we need to look at all of that stuff within this binary that the US was formed on. But we can absolutely hold space. It doesn't have to be an either or, and that's what people kind of sometimes make it. Well, we're talking about this, we can't talk about Native. We can talk about all, because it all is together. It's all people of color being affected by this, under this culture of white supremacy. And so understanding it and talking about, but you have to do the educating. That's the number one thing. Don't talk about this and you're not educating yourself on the model minority myth, on the genocide of Native American people. Look at all of that stuff.
I like this question here about how should athletic departments navigate relationships or communications with vendors, donors, alumni that are known to support racist institutions.
You telling me there's only one donor, only one vendor? Is that what you're saying? Because that's the reason, is that you have to do more work then. If you have a donor that is absolutely supporting these racist institutions, thank you for your past donations. We just don't know if we're a good fit. Because there's nothing worse than these Black athletes are out on the court and these white donors are saying some racist stuff and nothing's being done to them because they want their money. It's not acceptable. So you have to make a decision. What is more important for you? Because I'm telling you, when you make a stance, people will follow you.
Yes.
If you make a stance and say, we are not going to accept money from people who support X, Y, and Z, other people are going to throw money at you. If you say we are not, there was this video of this Black woman. I don't know if you saw it. Somebody was coming to do work on her house, and the guy had this humongous Confederate flag, and she stepped outside and was like, "Thank you for your service, but we're not going to use you after seeing that flag. Have a good day." And that's what you need to say. Like, you support these. We cannot use you as a vendor. You have got to make a stance in every area possible. You can't say, well, we're going to make a Black Lives Matter statement, but these donors, they give us a lot of money, so we're just keep them away from Black people. We're going to do this. Like, there was that situation with Penn State where that white donor wrote that letter to the football player. It was like about his dreads and all this stuff. And it was just a horribly racist letter. That Penn State should have been like, immediately, your tickets are gone, access is gone, everything is gone. This is a racist letter. We do not condemn this. Is unacceptable. We are protecting our players first and foremost. And if any other donors have that idea, thank you for your past donations. We will not be working with you. You need to make harsh statements when it is a student athlete welfare issue. You have got to protect those athletes. And that's one part of it, is making sure that those donors are not able to say those things because their money is more important than them. Same thing with vendors. Look, I've worked at schools. Y'all got a CVS list of vendors. Pick some other ones. It literally is that simple. And they got to decide what's more important, if they want money or their views.
Yep. And like I said, the playbook is changing. If this all scares you, great. It should scare you. It's different, it's new. And also what should scare you more is not doing it. Let us remember what happened. Was it 2014 or 2015? It took one football game for the Black athletes on the football team at the University of Missouri to threaten to sit, and the chancellor was gone, and a president was gone, and an entire institution changed. What are you going to pick? Because the old playbook is gone. If your money isn't where your mouth is and your decisions aren't in alignment with the stuff you're posting in your statements and on social media, it will not work out well.
Okay, we got that. Somebody said we can start a podcast together. We do a webinar on Sundays. Our next one is what, on the 5th, July 5th?
July 5th.
Yeah, so we already do, like, girl, we be talking about this for like hours. My boyfriend was like, you gotta cut it to an hour. I'm like, no, we don't. So yes. Let's see here. What, did I just ask you? You just asked me?
I don't remember, but I have one here that I'd love for you to jump in on if you want. What are the best resources to utilize and share with staff as we're working from home and only meeting daily via Zoom?
What are the best resources? I think, with this is there's so many like if you check out genfritalks.com/resources, there's so many articles, books, like videos, and literally it could be something that you're like, okay, the 20 minutes of our Wednesday morning meeting, we're going to talk about this article, this book, this video, and make it very normalized. To me, that's the biggest key, is normalize. And say every Wednesday morning, even when we get back, we are going to talk about an article, something related to diversity. We're going to talk about accessibility with our facilities. We're going to talk about LGBT. We're going to talk about all of these things. And so you start normalizing it, that's the way, because I mean, if we only talk about it once a blue moon, people are going to think it's reactive versus, 20 minutes on the agenda, we're going to talk about, somebody picked an article or whatever it is, and we're going to go from there.
I'd also just want to add that I don't think, Zoom, Zoom is difficult, but in some ways, like, I think that folks are finding it a little easier to engage in these trainings and workshops from home than in some ways it's easier to be uncomfortable and wrestle with these topics when you're in the comfort of your home than when we're all sitting around conference tables at work. And so the idea that we can't be doing meaningful facilitation and education and engagement because we're working from home or we're working remotely, I think is just not true.
This is a really good one. You only get like 2 minutes to answer it, because I know you can go for a while. I support the police, but I do think there should be reform. I don't think defunding is the answer. I also think that there are bad people and bad police. Help me address this. I don't have the answer.
I think the thought that you're supposed to have the answer is part of the problem. you know, I don't have the answer. And really, quite frankly, I'm not supposed to have the answer. The system was designed to benefit me, and the system benefits me every day. And so I know that I can imagine, like I can sit here and have this conversation and I can imagine like all the places to throw rocks at the wall to try to dent holes in it. I can imagine how to take down the system, but I can't imagine how to rebuild it because the system has worked for me. And so all of the values or the things that I shared about my own beliefs or perspectives about police is because I've listened, and philosophically, I believe in following the lead of the folks who are most marginalized by systems. And so I hear the family members, the mothers, the activists in the Black community, but the folks who are most directly impacted by police violence, I listen to what they're saying a future could look like, and then I read some more and listen some more, but that's what informs my beliefs. Like the thought that I should know what to do, to me is really laughable. Like I don't know what to do. I got pulled over not that long ago, and you know, I was not afraid for my life. I got out of the ticket. Like real talk, like the way a cop treats a white, feminine presenting white lady of my age is almost disgusting when you compare it to how they treat somebody, how they would treat Jen versus me, right? And so the thought that I could know how to fix it, I think is just, I couldn't. So I listen to those who are most marginalized in any social justice area or issue. I listen to the people who are most marginalized by a system in order to know how we should move forward.
Okay, so for that one, I think whenever we talk about the police, I feel like this is the only profession where if we talk about accountability, it means that we hate them. And that's not true. We just want to hold them accountable. I mean, we have to look that, you know, policing is rooted in slave patrol, and we have to understand the history of it, that these things just don't pop up. And so whenever I talk about police, I talk about how the question should be, how do we hold them accountable, and what's the problem with holding them accountable? And to me, it's the police union contracts. Join Campaign Zero and Check the Police are two organizations to pay attention to when it comes to like police union contracts, because we need to see what's going on with those contracts. And like one of them is it gives police the opportunity after a shooting to wait 48 hours before they're questioned. That doesn't happen in anything else. If I shot someone right now, I'm being questioned in 2 seconds. It's another thing that if while an investigator is doing a, we have to wrap up by 1:57. Okay, 3 minutes. If they're doing an investigation on an officer and they find more misconduct, they can't actually investigate that misconduct. If misconduct is being submitted more than 100 days after the incident, then it doesn't happen. So like, why are people not being held accountable, and what do police union contracts have to do with that?
Because one of the question I think was also about like how to have the conversation. Yeah. And one of the best examples that I've heard recently was actually Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said, essentially, when people are like, well, what does defund the police? Like, what does that even mean? Or what does that look like? And she said it spot on. And I wouldn't have thought of this, but it looks like what policing looks like in the suburbs. It looks like what budgets look like in the suburbs. You know, where I live, there is an investment in the schools and an investment in community centers and libraries and after school programs. And so we don't have to have like all the policing because we invest in community, and most suburbs are that way. And so the idea is like, so everyone could sort of live that way instead of having the police be the answer to all types of other community related issues. And so I don't know if that's helpful to think about when you're talking to other people. Like, I think it's easy for people who live one way to tell how other people should have to live, but we wouldn't want to live that way.
Yeah. We have 1 more minute. I just wanted to hit this one. What does accountability look like for an athletic department member at a private institution who repeatedly uses the N-word? They're fired.
Yeah.
I mean, they're like, if you're repeatedly using the N-word, you ain't got a job. Like, go use the N-word on some street corner, but you ain't finna use it at this institution. Like, that right there is an example. If you allow that to happen, you're perpetuating white supremacy. You're having your Black athletes exist in a very unsafe space. Like, they should have been fired. Why? If I called an LGBT person the F word, I would be fired. Like, that wouldn't even be a question. But we're gonna allow someone to use the N word. Anything else you have for that?
We need more time. I dropped the link to our next webinar in the chat that Jen said we do every other Sunday night. We've been doing them. We love doing them. We'll keep doing them. So the link's there if you're interested in joining us. If you can't be there, but you sign up, we'll send you the recording after the fact. But thanks for this conversation and your questions. This is not easy stuff. And, you know, in some ways things are changing really fast. But thanks for your efforts and your commitment. Jen, you got anything?
Follow us on social media because we talk about this stuff all the time. Instagram, Twitter, follow us. Okay, Jean, we're done.
Thank you.
Jen, Victoria, thank you both so very much for being with us this afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jean Merrill. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I'm also a Director of Inclusion at the NCA National Office, and really appreciate Jen's and Victoria's candor during this webinar today. You know, it's my hope that through today's webinar, they've at least in part engaged, enraged, and uncaged some of your thinking around being anti-racist in our collective path towards racial justice. I will say that looking at the number of questions submitted, the vast majority of the questions we didn't have enough time to get to, which means there's more work to do. So I'm so glad that everyone was able to join us on this webinar today, but please don't put this away and consider this work accomplished. This is lifelong work, and this is just the beginning of what we all have to do to create a more equitable world. Broadly speaking, just want to let you know that this webinar, as well as yesterday's webinar with our student athletes, those will be posted on our NCAA Inclusion webpage in the next few days, hopefully early next week. We will send you an email notification with links to both of those so that you're alerted when those are available. And we do encourage you to share those with anyone and everyone that has an interest. Those are public facing, so we've gotten a lot of questions about whether this webinar can be made available to others. Absolutely yes, and please do so. Lastly, I'll say this two-part webinar series is part of a larger Office of Inclusion summer series. Unfortunately, we weren't able to be with you in person in Denver for the NCAA Inclusion Forum in April, and so this is our effort to bring some of this meaningful programming in all 5 of our core areas to you remotely in really enriching and meaningful ways. So please keep an eye out for upcoming programs, and please reach out to any of our Office of Inclusion staff if you have any questions regarding today or any previous programming or upcoming programming. With that, please stay safe. Please take care of yourselves and one another, and do something a little bold and outrageous. Thank you.